Welcome back, students. We are back with another lesson. Now, in this lesson, we'll discuss combination of thin lenses. Fine. Now, suppose you are given one lens, two lens, or more than two lens. Fine. So, what is their effect? Okay. How do they work? What is the equation of their focal length? What is the equation or expression for their power? What happens to the power? What happens to their focal length? We will study in this lesson. Fine. So in this lesson, we'll try to obtain the expression for the effective focal length of two thin lenses placed in contact coaxially with each other. Fine. So for this, okay, look here. Consider you have two lenses. This is my lens L1 and this is my lens L2. Okay, let me make it a little bit big. Fine. So this is your lens L1 and this is your lens L2. Fine. They are placed in contact with each other. Fine. This is their point of contact. Fine. Apart from that, they are placed along the same line. Fine. Suppose this is your principal axis. Then they are placed along the same axis. In that case, we will say the two lenses are placed in contact and coaxially with each other. Fine. So this is your lens L1. This lens L1 has a focal length f1 and this is your lens L2. This lens L2 has your focal length f2. Fine. Now consider a point object O placed on the principal axis. This O acts as your point object. Fine. Now okay. Fine. Now consider an point object in the absence of the light. Oh, sorry, in the absence of your lens L1. Fine. Now a ray starts from this point O. It strikes the surface. Fine. And then what happens to this light? This light undergoes diffraction and forms a final image at I dash. Fine. This is how your lens L1 works. Now in this case, the distance from the object the distance from the object O to the center of this lens. Okay, let us denote it by C1. So the distance from the object O to C1. Okay, this one is your object distance. Fine. and the distance from the center of the lens to the image is represented by your image distance denoted by V dash. Fine. So this is how your lens L1 works. Okay. So let me just write down. Let O let OC1 let OC1 be your object distance represented by small u. Fine. Now, in the absence of your second lens, in absence of lens L2, fine. In absence of your lens L2, what happens? Your image distance is represented by C1I. Fine. So I can write C1I dash equals to your image distance V dash. Fine. Fine. Now, for your lens L1, the focal length is represented by F1. In that case, using your thin lens formula, using thin lens formula, thin lens formula, thin lens formula, fine, 1 by focal length. The focal length for your lens L1 is F1 equals to 1 by image distance. The image distance is V dash minus 1 by object distance. The object distance is represented by U. Fine. So this is your first equation. Fine. Okay. Now let me draw this one in your main picture. Okay. So what happened is that a light starts from the object. A light starts from the object O and it strikes the lens L1. Fine. And then after refraction, it forms an image at I dash. Okay. So this is your image distance V dash. This is your object distance U. Fine. Okay. Now consider the presence of your lens L2. Okay. So let me write down. In the presence of lens L2, in the presence of lens L2, okay. So what happens is that this image I dash will act as a virtual object for your lens L2. Fine. The image I dash formed by your lens L1 will act as a virtual object for your lens L2. Fine. So let me draw this one. Fine. So for your lens L2, the this is your virtual object. Fine. Now let us consider a light which starts to move from I. Fine. Now it strikes the lens L2, and what happens? After diffraction, it diverges. Okay, the light diverges, but it appears to diverge from this point. Clear? So in that case, it forms a image I dash on the principal axis. Fine. So let me draw this on your main diagram. So in this case, what happens? This acts as a virtual object. The light starts from this one, strikes on the lens L2. After diffraction, it bends away from the normal. But this one appears to be diverging from a point. This is the point where your image will be formed. Clear? So this is your image I. Fine. So now in our case, this V dash will act as your object distance. Fine. This one will act as a object distance. Okay. Now why will this one act as a object distance? Okay. Now consider, suppose you have lens L1. This is your lens L1, and you have another lens. Okay. This is your lens L2. Fine. Now they are placed very close to each other. Okay. So in that case, suppose this is your object distance I dash. Okay. So if they are placed very close to each other, fine. If they are placed very close to each other, then in that case, what happens? Suppose this point is the center of curvature C1. This point is the center of curvature C2. Fine. Now, can you see from this figure? Your C1 I dash is approximately equals to C2 I dash. Fine. So what is C1 and C2? C1 is the center for the lens L1. C2 is the center for the lens L2. Okay. Now since C1 I dash equals to C2 I dash. Fine. So in that case, what happens? Okay, let me just write down here. In the presence of the lens L2, first of all, this I dash will act as your object. So I will write down this one. The image the image I dash acts as virtual object, acts as virtual object. Fine. If this one acts as your virtual object, okay. So in that case, what is the object distance? Object distance is C2 I dash for your lens L2. Fine. C2 I dash. Okay. Now we know C2 I dash is approximately equals to C1 I dash. So in that case, C1 I dash is how much? V dash. Then in that case, what is C2 I dash? C2 I dash will also be equal to V dash. Fine. So this V dash acts as the object distance. Fine. Now, what will be your image distance? The image distance. Okay. The final image is formed at I. So let this represent your image distance, small v. Fine. So I can write down C1, sorry, C2 I is the image distance, which is represented by small v. Fine. Now we have object distance, we have image distance, and we know what is the focal length of your second lens. It is f2. Then in that case, again using thin lens formula, I can write down 1 by focal length, which is f2, equals to 1 by the image distance, which is v, minus 1 by the object distance, which is v dash. Fine. Now let me give this equation a number. Let this one be your equation 2. Fine. So I have equation 1 and equation 2. Okay. Now let's add equation 1 and equation 2 in our next page. Fine. So I can write down adding equation 1 and equation 2, we get fine. So first what we will do, we will add the left hand side part. Okay. Now on the left hand side I have 1 by f1, and on the left hand side I have 1 by f2. So let us first write down the left hand side part. 1 by f1 plus 1 by f2. Fine. Equals to, now let's look at the right hand side part. On the right hand side I have 1 by v dash minus u, and on this equation I have 1 by v minus v dash. So let's write this one. 1 upon v dash minus 1 upon u plus 1 upon v minus 1 upon v dash. Now if you look carefully, this term and this term can get cancelled. Fine. So let me cancel these two terms. Fine. Now after rearranging this one, I can write this one as 1 upon v minus 1 upon u. Fine. So 1 by f1 plus 1 by f2 equals to 1 upon v minus 1 upon u. Let us give this equation a number. this one be your equation 3. Fine. Now look very carefully. Okay. Now what you have seen in this case. Okay. Now look at this two lens. Okay. What happens? There is an object O. This object O forms an image or your final image at I. Fine. This image I is formed by the two lens, your lens L1 and L2. Okay. So in this case, your lens L1 and L2 acts as your single lens. This acts as a single lens. And this single lens is known as equivalent lens. Fine. When one lens serves the property of two or more than two lens, then in that case, such lens are known as your equivalent lens. Fine. This is your equivalent lens. Can you see? Here two lenses are required to form the image of the object. So what happens is that this equivalent lens serves the purpose of this two lens. Okay, so this two lens is equivalent to a single lens, hence this is known as your equivalent lens. Okay, so now for this equivalent lens, consider this one as your object distance u, this one as your image distance v. Fine. So I can write down for equivalent lens, for equivalent lens of focal length of focal length f. I can write using thin lens formula 1 by f equals to 1 by image distance v minus 1 by object distance u. This is my equation 4. Fine. Now compare your equation 3 and your equation 4. Look at the right hand side part. Fine. Look at the right hand side part. They have the same right hand side part. Can you see? 1 by v minus 1 by u. Therefore, the left hand side part should also be equal. Fine. So I can write down comparing equation 3 and equation 4, we get 1 by f of equation 4 equals to 1 by f1 plus 1 by f2. Fine. 1 by f1 plus 1 by f2. So your equivalent focal length is given by this relation. Fine. 1 by f, 1 by f1 plus 1 by f2. Fine. Now, in our previous class, we have discussed about the power of lens. Power of lens is given by inverse of focal length. P equals to 1 by f. So using this relation, I can write down the equivalent power okay. So P equals to 1 by F. I can write down P equals to 1 by F1 equals to P1 and 1 by F2 equals to P2. Therefore, the equivalent power can be written as P1 plus P2, where P1 is the power of your lens L1 and P2 is the power of your lens L2. Right? So this is the formula for equivalent power. Fine. So now, instead of considering only two lenses, if there are more than two lenses, okay, consider if there are n thin lenses in contact, then I can write for n thin lenses, for n thin lenses in contact, we have 1 by 1 upon f equals to 1 upon f1 plus 1 upon f2 plus 1 upon f3 and so on till 1 upon fn. Okay, so if n thin lenses are placed in contact, then the equivalent focal length can be written like this. Fine, it will be the sum inverse of all the focal length. Fine, if this is the focal length, then your equivalent power can be written as P equals to P1 plus P2 plus power of your third lens plus so on till power of your nth lens. Fine. So this is the equivalent power where P1 represents the power of the first lens, P2 equals to the power of your second lens, P3 is the power of the third lens and so on. So this is the total power. Fine. And the equivalent focal length will be 1 by f equals to 1 by f1 plus 1 by f2 so on till 1 by f. That is, it is the sum inverse of all the focal length and your equivalent power is the sum of all the powers. Fine. Okay. Fine. Moving to our next question. Write an expression for the total magnification produced by the combination of lenses. Okay, now in that case, what happens? Suppose you have your lens L1. Okay, this is your lens L1. This lens produces a magnification M1 of the final image. Fine. Now you have another lens L2. This lens again produces a magnification of M2 of the image which is formed by your lens L1. Fine. Similarly, consider one more lens, your lens L3. This is the lens L3. Fine. It produces a magnification M3. This is the magnified image produced by this two lens. Fine. So on. Fine. So on. So in that case, the total magnification, okay, the total magnification can be written as the product of all the magnifications. Okay, so the total magnification is represented by small m, which in turn equals to the product of m1, the magnification produced by the first lens, multiplied by m2, the magnification produced by your second lens, times m3, the magnification produced by your third lens, and so on. Fine. This is the expression for the total magnification. Fine. So that's it for today's class. Thank you. And if you have any confusion, please don't hesitate to ask. I will re-explain it to you again. So thank you.